Morning, guys. I hope you're all okay and not too anxious over what's happening. I'm going to do a short video, guys, on the moon landing. But firstly, I want to say don't be getting too anxious about what's happening, guys. I know it's worrying, but all I can I'll talk to you about essentially is history. And in regards to history, you have most of the course done, guys. We have the full dictatorship and democracy done. We have the full pursuit of sovereignty done, and we have the hardest elements of Northern Ireland done. Your research topic is ready to be written up, and your documents you're done once we have the moon landing finished. So you're well ahead in history. I know it probably doesn't put you much at ease, guys, but not much we can do. But every Leaving Cert student in the country is in the same predicament. So all we can do is stay going, guys, and see what happens in the news over the next while. But anyway, in regards to the moon landing, guys, I'm going to talk to you. It'll be a short enough video. Obviously, I gave you notes on the moon landing last week, and I'm going to talk you through a little bit of the key points now. This won't go into as much detail as the notes I gave you the last day, guys. I'm just keeping it short and to the point with this video. So firstly, guys, if you look at up in top left of this handout, I will put this up in OneNote as well. The timeline of major events. So how do we get to the moon landing? So the moon landing happened in 1969, but obviously it was part of a space race, a race to get to the moon first between America and Russia. It was essentially part of the battle of the Cold War. Now, the first few, and again you can see by what's written beside them, the USSR won most of the first few battles to get into space. So the very first object sent into space in 1957 was called Sputnik, or Sputnik 1. It's the first, like a football essentially, first object ever sent into space. Same year, the first living thing sent into space was sent in there, a little Jack Russell dog called Laika. And again, Russia were the first country to get there. So Russia was really ahead in regards to the first essentially getting into space. And I spoke to you about this, I think, in the very last class that we had, that Laika never returned. It died leaving our atmosphere. And being a communist country, Russia kept that information themselves and only came out years afterwards. 1958, you have America finally getting involved. They sent their first satellite. NASA, so the space agency, essentially was established in 1958 with the aim of essentially getting to the moon at some point. But still, Russia would win the next few battles. And the first probe to land on the moon, obviously without a person in it, was the Luna 2 in 1960. Again, that was Russia. 1961 is a key event. You have Yuri Gagarin, who became the very first living person in space, and he became a hero then in communist Russia. Again, as part of a victory. Now, America would get there a few months afterwards. Alan Shepard being the first American, it didn't matter. So first is everything, second is nothing, essentially, in the moon landing, in getting towards the moon landing. In 1961, JFK made a very famous speech. Might be a good idea, guys, to actually put this into YouTube. It's regarded as one of the most famous American speeches ever, JFK's moon speech. And I kind of showed you how far the American presidency has fallen since Trump has taken over when you look at his speeches. But it's a very, very famous speech, and he talked about the necessity to get to the moon, and to get to the moon before the end of the 60s. Now, obviously, JFK was to sadly die a couple of years afterwards, 1963, and America felt like they owed him to get to the moon before the 1960s had ended, which it did just about. We see afterwards then Mercury 7, John Glenn, the first American in orbit, and a couple of disasters as well. So Apollo 1 was a tragedy, he was killed. 3 astronauts, and the Saturn 5 rocket successfully tested. In 1968, the Apollo 8 successfully orbits the moon. Now, orbits, it didn't land. Actually, landing on the moon is actually the hardest part. So moving on to the right-hand side, guys, it's part of the Cold War. The moon landing is essentially a key element of the Cold War, because there was an intense rivalry, really deep rivalry between America and Russia at this time, in lots of elements, in building nuclear weapons, in different wars around the world, like in Korea, like in Vietnam, and in getting into space. So that's hence why it's known as a space race. It was all propaganda as well, so both countries wanted to prove that they were better than the other one. we moved down here a little bit. So after World War II, the Americans believed they had the edge. They were convinced they actually had the edge in the early 50s. They got some of the top German scientists after World War One and Two. You see one I mentioned there, Werner von Braun, who developed the V1 and V2 rockets for the Nazis, which they just got at the very end of the war, which was too late. But he was working for the Americans now, so they were convinced they were ahead, and that's why they were very shocked that actually no, they were losing the first few battles to get into space. On top of that, you see a few other points. So the USA had bases in Europe near the USSR and could launch nuclear strikes. So that's obviously this will just count sort of space races. The nuclear battle was going on at the same time. Now, LBJ, who obviously we've learned about so much with Vietnam, created a huge fuss over Sputnik, which forced Eisenhower into the space race. So Sputnik, just to remind you, in 1957 was the very first object sent into space. And LBJ, who's fighting a war, who's going to be fighting a war a few years later against communism, was angry that communism was winning this battle. So the media got involved and felt that America needs to get involved, needs to push to win the space race. So when JFK came, he promised that there would be a man on the moon in his words before the decade is out. But obviously, it's a big project to actually achieve, to send men to the moon. I'm going to skip on to another slide here, guys. So talking about the actual moon landing. So we came across the point already that NASA, who's in charge of all space programs, was set up in 1958 with the aim of essentially organizing US space exploration. The Apollo 11 is the one that the key moon landing, and obviously this was the first moon landing, and this is the one that your case study is about. So you'll need to know about this, guys. So the bits, they're in bold here for a reason. The Apollo 11 had 3 parts. The spaceship itself had 3 parts. You have the command module, Columbia, where the 3 astronauts are quite close together. So when you see a spaceship, they're obviously gigantic. But actually the bit where the astronauts in is very, very small, and they lose bits of the spaceship at different points. So what comes back actually at the very end is very small. You have the service module, which holds the rockets and the fuels and the very bottom part of the rocket. And then you have the lunar module. This is the bit that can break away, called the Eagle. And the Eagle is the bit that will land on the moon. Now, there were 3 astronauts sent on it. And their names are obviously key, guys. Whatever question 4 comes up, if it's the moon landing, you'll need to talk about these. Neil Armstrong was the commander, was the leader. You have Eugene Buzz Aldrin, but known as Buzz Aldrin. He was the pilot of the lunar module. The lunar module is the Eagle, which will land on the moon. And Michael Collins, who is piloting the command module. Now, he never got to actually walk on the moon because he was still looking after the main aspect of the spaceship. They practiced in the simulators, guys. Months and months and months of training went into this, and they put their body under severe stress and experienced weightlessness, for example, in underwater tanks. So they took off in July 16th, 1969, and millions were watching on TV. This was watched throughout the world to see would it be a success. I mean, this is a time that most people didn't have TV, so everybody would go to local bars or would go to the local TV shop to look in the window, different things like that. It was a moment where everybody knew where the war would happen. Now, take them the best part of 3 to 4 days to actually get to the moon. And they had some difficulties along the way as well. Actually, the point where they're landing on the moon was very, very dangerous, and things would have gone very, very wrong very quickly. The 20th of July, Armstrong and Aldrin took the lunar module, so they're at the moon at this point. They took the lunar module to the moon landing on the Sea of Tranquility. So Sea of Tranquility is a part of the moon, a flat part of the moon that it had to land on. And Armstrong made his very famous speech, stepping off the Eagle. It's one small step for mankind. It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind. So it's obviously a small step for him, but for mankind, such a gigantic step to set foot on the moon. They spent about 20 hours walking throughout the moon, mainly just doing experiments, collecting rock samples and things like that, and planting a US flag as well. The Eagle took off from the moon and then docked back with the command module. They returned to Earth protected by a heat shield, because actually entering the Earth's atmosphere is, you're talking about thousands of degrees, and that's serious pressure to get back in to Earth's atmosphere. And they landed in the Pacific Ocean, way away from any land. But an American warship went over to collect them, But, and this word that you hear so much now recently, they were quarantined because they're coming back from a place where nobody knew what it was like. So they were kept in quarantine for 21 days, 3 weeks, in case they had any disease or bring back anything from the moon. At the end, obviously, it was found out that they weren't, obviously, and they were let go after 21 days and treated like heroes. They went throughout the world and treated like absolute heroes for this, guys. But it's significance. At its high point, there was 500,000 people almost employed within NASA and within the Apollo project. The US essentially had won the space race. Now, I know it says there that led, but this was the ultimate point of the space race, and they'd won it. They'd got there, and they'd also fulfilled Kennedy's commitment. Remember, Kennedy was an incredibly popular president. A part of America died when he died, and to fulfill what he wanted, Americans felt like this is an achievement, a real big achievement for him. The USSR rushed to get to the moon then afterwards, and it had a few disasters afterwards, and actually concentrated more so on space stations instead of the moon race afterwards. And actually, while there was a good few moon landings over the next couple of years, from 1972 onwards, budget cutbacks meant it just wasn't worth the money, and nobody has landed on the moon actually since 1972. There's a big argument now, guys. I was going to do a case study with you this week, but obviously it's going to be a bit trickier to do now. But there's a big debate at the time as to whether the billions that were being spent on space exploration was money well spent, or should that billions, like the Vietnam War, should it instead be spent on education, health, senior citizens, etc. Coming back then to the one we were looking at a minute ago. So the results down the bottom left, guys, are pretty much similar to what I said a minute ago. Why was the USA the first country to put a man on the moon? The USSR did not put as much funding into its space program to actually get to the moon as America did. But the USA had made big advances in the 1960s, and more bypassing. Communism was struggling a little bit, and we're rushing things, as I mentioned, guys. So we'll leave that there, guys. Okay, you have all of your notes on the moon landing now. Make sure you're very comfortable with it, that you're well able to answer a question for it. I will add notes on the OneNote, guys, on OneNote for us as well, guys. I might just open up OneNote, guys. Really, really key that if you're not in OneNote, that you let me know, guys, because I have you all added into OneNote. So it's up to you to tell me if it's not working for you in any way. So any work that I'm giving, guys, is going to be in the calendar over the next while. So obviously this could go on a good few weeks. So the work I'm going to be adding into the calendar down into March. Okay. Now, just to show you the different points that we've done. So Northern Ireland, now we're only halfway through Northern Ireland, but every PowerPoint I've given you, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 are there. They're all there, the PowerPoints on every topic that we cover, and they're useful to do. So you have the pursuit of sovereignty, guys. Every PowerPoint we've done, they're all in there. Okay. Dictatorship of democracy, same thing. Every single PowerPoint that we've done is in there. Now you usually have about 8 or 9 PowerPoints for each topic, guys. Pick one each night. So say tonight, after you've done your work tonight, you could say, I'm going to do Lenin and Power. You've got the PowerPoint there. Spend 40 minutes or whatever, guys, looking back in it, making sure you know the key words on it. There on it. Okay. It's structured learning. Structured learning is what's so key at this point, guys. I cannot stress it enough. Pick a topic, spend your 40 minutes to an hour at that, and then stop, or maybe spend 5 minutes just seeing in your head what can you remember from that. Okay, if you do that, I promise you'll do very, very well in June. Again, email me, guys, any point if there's any questions, if there's anything you're not sure of. The last point, I will put this up in the calendar, guys. I know I spoke to you about your mocks were due to be back with me on either Friday or Monday. It appears they haven't been posted from the company, guys. I don't know if I'll be able to get them back. The school is closed. I can't even go into the school, so I don't know if I'm going to get access to the results, guys, before we get back to school, unfortunately. I'll keep you informed as soon as I get them. As soon as I hear about them, you'll hear about them, guys. Okay, but any questions about any material, guys, you're not sure of, let me know. I'm here any time of the day, just let me know. Okay, take it easy, guys. Talk to you soon.